For now, you are listening to Shua. I am the host of a podcast called Light Up with Shua. It's a weekly podcast on conscious living and parenting. And I have my guest for the third time, and I'm honored to have her. And it is a privilege, and I think it's a big deal that she is here again on my podcast, and hopefully a few more times, because I still have to, let me zoom her book back there. That is Women and Gender in the Qur'an. So that's her book, and she has edited other books. So we'll talk about that later. Today we are focusing on the topic of fasting. But first, Dr. Ibrahim will introduce herself, and let's see where we go from there. Yes, please. Thank you so much for being here, Doctor.
It's a pleasure. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Peace and blessings be upon you.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, I do many things involving Islam and scholarship and Islam and spiritual care. And I teach in a boarding school context right now as well. And I teach courses on philosophy and religious studies, all different religions, not just Islam, and different periods of the ancient world, and some modern history and some global issues types of classes as well.
Wow, that's interesting. Do you fast?
Inshallah, Ramadan is coming up. We're currently in the 7th month of the Islamic calendar, so Ramadan is right around the corner, and Ramadan's the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, and that's when I do the majority of my fasting. Some people do fast throughout the year. Many people have a Monday, Thursday fast on the example of the beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. For me, I focus most of my energies in the month of Ramadan.
Okay. Good. So should we talk about before you became a Muslim? Is that okay for you to talk about?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
All right. So
and I didn't fast at all then.
Yeah, so that's what my question was, like being so you were?
Yeah, so I converted to Islam, and I think I was in my early 20s, and I had never... Well, my understanding of the concept of fasting before that was more in a Christian context, where you would fast from certain foods on particular days. So you can imagine that going from taking out meat one day a week to taking out food and water and other things for 18 hours a day was quite a big jump for a month at a time.
Right.
So yeah, but I did... I witnessed people fasting before then I started Islam, so I was always intrigued by how they could function, and I was with students my classmates who would be fasting and would still be taking the same exams that I would and the like. So I remember before I officially took it on myself as a responsibility, being very impressed by the dedication of people in my life who I knew were fasting.
Thank you. So that's interesting. So like you did mention a little bit, you just slid into, fasting, this aspect of Islam.
Oh, I practically passed out my first time fasting. I could hardly make it through a day, and I would have to take really long naps in order to complete the fast. But alhamdulillah, I've realized, praise to God who gives the strength and energy for fasting, that the more your body acclimates to it, then the easier it can become. And the secret to easier fast is to take a good meal before the pre-dawn time. And so oftentimes I'm in a position where, wake up at 2, wake up at 3, and eat a nice hearty meal. And I find that when I do that in particular, that helps get through the day a little bit more, because without that, you're potentially fasting an even longer time.
So now you're an expert in fasting.
Well, I don't know about expert, but it certainly comes a lot easier.
Okay.
Praise to God who grants the ability to fast.
That's nice. So how does it make you any different than before? Like when you were not fasting at all, but really practicing it and then doing other stuff in being a Muslim.
Exactly.
And at the moment you are doing, teaching. So you will be teaching during Ramadan?
Oh, yes. So these days, our days start very early, and it's a very continual process of teaching. I teach many classes in a day. And so it does get a little bit more tiring because I am fasting. But I tend to then conserve energy in a day to say, I know I'm going to have a more limited bandwidth. So things that aren't quite as important then fall off the agenda. And to me, that's actually quite useful because it helps me look at my time when I do have a more abundant energy and say, well, actually, what is important? If I could do all my responsibilities with a shorter bandwidth of energy, then maybe I'm doing things that are just not necessary that I could cut out. So it's a way of examining what's really worth spending energy on. I think the other side of fasting is the discipline of self-control. And that's a self-control about actions, but it's also a self-control about interior states and emotions, because it's very easy for our minds to pick something and obsess over it. And the discipline of fasting teaches you to consciously choose what you'd like to focus on. And so when you're fasting, you simply don't think about eating or don't think about food. And then it makes it easier to maybe direct your mind in other areas of your life too, after having the practice, maybe seeing something you want, a glass of water, something like this, very, very simple and basic, but telling yourself, well, at 3 hours from now, 5 hours from now, 10 hours from now, then I will drink that glass of water, God willing, but right now I'm going to refrain. And so that also helps with having patience and having perseverance and having a commitment to the things that you set yourself out to do. Right? It would be very easy for me to say, oh, I'm thirsty, here's the water. True. But to have the commitment to say, no, I set out to do something, I will finish it.
True. So it changed you in any form or shape? Like, do you feel that you're better or not so good? Or like, what has fasting done for you?
Yes, it's because it's such a long process as well, the month of Ramadan, and women take a break when they're on their menstrual cycle because, practically speaking, you're already losing potentially bodily fluid, so that might be a reason for a little bit of a lenience, but really it's just this is the way that the law comes to us in Islam. So we think that there could be wisdom behind it, but it's also just the way we do it, the rules we follow. And so in those days, women will make them up at some other point, either in the month immediately preceding Ramadan, or some people make it up at another point in the year before the next Ramadan. But it's still, potentially it could be for a woman, it could be a 3-week stretch for, middle-aged woman or any post-pubescent woman. Yeah. But it could also, for men, then it's an entire 29, 30 days potentially. And your cycles adapt, your body adjusts, just like my body got used to fasting in general. Even in a month of Ramadan, it might start out a little bit more difficult to go a stretch, but by the end of the month, your body has really, your metabolism has adjusted and it responds. And so it gives you a physical reset in a way. And oftentimes the month of Ramadan, it's not just about the fasting, but it's about the praying at night. And so people have been very, very focused and dedicated to their spiritual life in terms of their connection to the Qur'an, to the holy book of Islam. And so the fasting is one part of Ramadan, but for most people who are observing the praying and the fasting, it's really those two together that I think work on the consciousness to really create transformative change that a person then notices as they go from one year to the next.
Okay. Do you feel healthier?
Oh, absolutely. We joke sometimes about like a post-Ramadan glow because your systems, your physical digestive systems have had a chance to reset a bit. Intermittent fasting is very, very popular these days in health circles. And, Ramadan is an ancient intermittent fast, essentially. Yes. Yeah. So it really does all of the medical benefits that are known about intermittent fasting, I think probably would, if people study it with some depth, extend to Ramadan as well.
Yeah. So you feel that spiritually also, does it make a difference to you every year? Are you more focused? Or when you are teaching and fasting, does that give you more energy also? Because everybody has their own experience, obviously.
Well, many times people joke about like a post-lunch sluggishness, and you don't really get a post-lunch sluggishness during Ramadan. Yeah. So I actually feel like, thankfully, I do feel more mental clarity during the month, either because of just the intrinsic blessings of the month or something having to do with the
combination, right? Of spiritual, physical,
exactly,
mentally prepared.
The other aspect of Ramadan is that it's a wonderful communal time too. And so people go out of the way to host or to visit families and friends. And so there's, as much as it's a time where it demands a lot of you, it also gives a lot to you. And I kind of think about Ramadan the way maybe a marathoner, I've never run a marathon, but like maybe like a marathoner like knows it's coming and has some anxiousness about how am I going to manage this, given that I have these other responsibilities, and or it's that training that you do, ideally fasting a few days here and there throughout the year, that keeps you fit enough to go into Ramadan. But it's an interesting holiday in that it's not just celebration, it demands a lot.
Yeah. So you were talking about the prayers, that is in addition to 5 prayers during the day that you were saying the nightly prayers, right? And are you able to manage that with all the work you do?
It's interesting because Ramadan, given that Islamic calendar is on a lunar cycle, it moves throughout the year. The solar calendar is 11 days longer than the lunar calendar. And so Ramadan, when I first started fasting as a new Muslim in my 20s, was in September. And now we've gone through the summer months. And in the summer months, the last prayer of the evening would come in maybe 8:30-ish.
Quite late.
And then we'd head to the mosque, and then we'd be in the mosque from pretty much until midnight, and then we'd come back and have a big meal of yogurt and all eggs.
Yeah,
and beans
let's learn about what does she eat. People, lay out your spread. What do you eat?
So in the beginning of the month, we start off much more ambitious and have everything, and everybody's very excited to be in the kitchen and preparing things at 2 a.m. And then by the end of the month, they're like, "Here's a cup of water." so the bandwidth is a little bit higher in the beginning of the month. But, so a summer fast is quite long. Yeah. And then in the summers, we have to stop eating by about 3 a.m. So, it could be 3 a.m. to 8:30, even 9 o'clock. Some summer days, or even slightly later than 9, depending where you are. Yeah. So the time, you have to be very, very organized in the time. Oftentimes the afternoons people do, especially on long summer fasts, need to take a little bit of downtime. People read a lot of Qur'an during the day, and that provides a rejuvenation. So you learn as well, you can't depend on food for your strength, so then you have to dig into your spirituality to derive the strength.
Would you be able to let our audience, listeners, viewers know where in the Qur'an it says to the Muslims or whoever follows this faith, the verse, the ayah that is there. So
the Qur'an says that fasting has been prescribed upon the Muslims as it has been prescribed on peoples before the Muslim community in 7th century Arabia. Yeah. And so we do, for instance, have similar requirements around fasting. Some other communities who have had fasting before us, the Jewish community, sometimes people do in modern times add things into the fast like water. Jewish people tend to do a fast that takes more than 24 hours, slightly longer than 24 hours. Yeah. So we don't have, So we don't have a 24-hour fasting. All of our fasting in the Islamic tradition is from the pre-dawn hours to the sunset.
Yeah, we don't. Anything else you want to say from your experience that any experience or any story that you would like to share?
So oftentimes I've had my non-Muslim friends just decide that they would like to fast with me. One of my friends fasted an entire month of Ramadan, just to understand the whole month. Yes,
wow.
it was
Usually I've heard like a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yes,
nice.
And so people can always feel that it's a tradition that is okay to join in on. You know, some things you're not always entirely sure what's okay, but you can always fast Ramadan with somebody, either the whole month or a day. Little children as well, oftentimes they'll start maybe just as so that they can feel the spirit of the month. Maybe they'll do a shorter fast, a half-day fast, or they'll fast from a particular thing. But generally, once Muslims begin to reach puberty, that's the time in which then they start being required in terms of an Islamic legal mindset, like a religious law framework, to be required to fast. But even younger children will get accustomed to fasting. And so if educators, for instance, sometimes they get very worried that we're starving our children or something like this. And it's not the case. So if anyone's out there working with younger children, but it is still important to monitor them to make sure that they're doing fine if they did choose to
unless
fast.
there's some kind of a health problem or somebody is on, especially as you said already, that there are some. So can you lay it out for reminder for some young Muslims who are not really practicing much, for them and for people who don't know about this faith? How do we practice? Can you lay out those people who shouldn't fast? Could you list that?
This moves into, again, a discussion of the Islamic legal territory, where if fasting causes a particular type of harm, so then you would not engage in the fast because it would produce a harm. So sometimes if a mother is pregnant and the pregnancy the fasting is she's not able to fast, that could be a reason. Interestingly, the Qur'an itself gives the permission for travelers. Our travel these days is not as it was in ancient times.
True.
So we can debate about whether or not travel is such a hardship as it was in the pre-modern world. But a traveler over a certain distance will get a dispensation that they could then fast other days. And there's certain other categories of people who are exempt from
if you're
fasting.
sick or if you're on medication that you can't really fast for that long. And as you said, on periods or menstruation, travel, what else? Is there anything else we are missing?
Yes, I've learned that there are many different specialties in Islam, so I have learned to only speak from my particular specialty, because there's legal scholars whose job it is to outline these things.
Right.
And just like I don't like certain non-specialists to talk about issues of sexuality and gender without a proper background in that field, then I try to restrain and refrain from speaking
But
about
these
other
are, I
fields.
think, very clearly laid out in the Quran that any average person can talk about that. If you're sick, if you're not able to, and if you have any serious health issue, and if, as you mentioned, travel, depending on who it is and how good or bad you feel, or your strength and all, and of course menstruation, it should be. These are some basic ones, I think, and I'm sure you agree with that. That are now beyond that. I understand that you don't want to delve into. Being
and there's always new cases that come up. Does this break a fast? Does that break a fast?
Okay, from that angle, fast breaking a fast would be different, but no's and yeses for who can fast and who can't. Like a 5-year-old is not obligated to fast till they hit puberty, and then depending on their health and all. So that's nice. Thank you so much. Let's come to Dr. Celene's personal, how do you feel? Really hungry? How bad you feel? Have you ever cheated?
Sometimes if I get a very bad headache, so that's pretty typical, but in the middle of the night, if you just have that meal, then that I found at least for me that helps go through the day. And for me, I'd rather I'd rather just go take a nap than I would cheat, because usually by the time you would want to feel the impulse to cheat, you're already so far into the fast that why break it at that point? Right? It's just like a cost benefit analysis. Like, I'm going to have to make this up. I'm already 13 hours in. I'm just going to take a nap and wait till the headache recedes. So that's more of my strategy.
True. Right. Very good. Very good. Do you exercise specifically during Ramadan, or do you avoid it?
Well, I think I should probably get more exercise in general, but Ramadan, I know many people do exercise, and one of the things that coaches worry about are athletes getting enough water and things. I know with my daughter, she actually, the best she's ever done is usually during Ramadan, because she's like focused and energetic in the right balance.
Okay.
But I think that oftentimes you can rinse your mouth out, or you can rinse your face, or like, so when I'm coaching, I coach a volleyball team these days, and if I have fasting athletes, I tell them, go to the restroom, like splash yourself really, really well, and so there's ways to kind of, without ingesting the water, which would break the fast, to stay cool and things like that.
So basically, we are not taking anything, we are not ingesting anything, eating anything from pre-dawn till sunset. So do you recommend your students to fast, those who are Muslims or non-Muslims, or how does it work?
Yes. So according to the basic kind of Islamic legal framework, the fasting is mandatory. So it's something that people can, if they have taken on themselves the commitment of Islam, if they see themselves as Muslim, then it's part of something that would be like the prayer incumbent upon them to do. And I find that many people, even if they're not upholding other core required pillars of Islam, oftentimes still maintain the fast is something that they do, and that they feel they derive much benefit from.
Thank you. Well, now we will go to the second segment, and where you will see me sitting next to Dr. Celene Ibrahim. See you shortly.